At the start of 1942, Allied pilots called it a Sky Phantom, the Mitsubishi Zero, Japan's apex predator, dominating the Pacific with a 1,930-mile range and a kill ratio so one-sided it felt invincible. US fighters fell in flames, no one could touch the Zero. But then, against all odds, a single Japanese ace, Tadayoshi Koga, crashed his fighter in the Alaskan tundra. Suddenly, America held the enemy's prize weapon fully intact. What American engineers found hidden beneath its battered skin would flip the air war on its head and change history forever. How could one forgotten crash decide the fate of the Pacific? The Mitsubishi A6M Zero was a machine built for dominance. With a range of 1,930 miles, it could strike farther than any Allied fighter in the Pacific, launching from carriers and reaching targets that seemed untouchable. Its climb rate, over 3,000 feet per minute, let pilots rocket skyward, gaining the upper hand before most enemies could react. In a turning contest, the Zero was untouchable. Japanese pilots could whip it through a full circle in just 9 seconds, slicing inside even the most agile American fighters. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat, the mainstay of the US Navy, needed nearly twice as long to complete the same maneuver. The difference was not subtle. In dogfights, the Zero could twist, roll, and climb away at will, leaving Allied pilots struggling to keep up. This edge came at a price. Japanese engineers stripped the Zero of almost everything that wasn't essential to speed and agility. There was no armor behind the pilot's seat, no bulletproof glass, and not a drop of self-sealing rubber in the fuel tanks. Every pound saved meant tighter turns, longer range, and a lighter feel on the controls. For the first 6 months of the war, these choices paid off. Kill-to-loss ratios soared as high as 12-1 in favor of the Zero in battles over Wake Island, the Coral Sea, and Midway. American and British pilots watched their best aircraft fall in flames, outturned and outclimbed by an enemy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Technical intelligence reports from the period underline the challenge. The Zero's turning radius at 200 miles per hour was just under 700 feet, almost half that of the Wildcat. Its modest top speed of 331 miles per hour was less important than the way it could dictate the fight, choosing when to engage or break away. Even the vaunted P-40 Warhawk and P-39 Airacobra, faster in a straight line, could not match the Zero's agility in a close-quarters fight. For Allied aircrews, the numbers told a grim story. The Zero could go farther, climb faster, and turn tighter than anything they had in the air. Until the Akutan crash, these cold statistics translated to hard losses and a growing sense of desperation on every frontline airstrip from Pearl Harbor to the Aleutians. Combat reports from the spring of 1942 read like dispatches from a losing battle. In the ready rooms across Midway, Wake, and the battered airstrips of the South Pacific, American pilots swapped stories of a foe they could barely see, let alone outmaneuver. The Zero became a legend among Allied aircrews, a shape glimpsed in the sun, a flash of wing, then a Wildcat spiraling down in flames. Pilots called it the Sky Phantom. Radio chatter captured the dread in the cockpit. "Bandit. High at 2 o'clock, he's closing, can't shake him." Again and again, squadrons scrambled to intercept incoming raids, only to watch the Zeros climb away at impossible angles or slip inside every defensive turn. One pilot from VF6, after a failed interception near the Solomons, wrote in his logbook, "It's like fighting a ghost. He's on your tail before you know he's there." Squadron logs from the Coral Sea and Midway list names crossed out in red ink. Each mission cost more than aircraft. It chipped away at morale. Briefings grew tense. Newcomers listened in silence as veterans explained that the usual tricks, diving for speed, banking hard right, only made them easier prey. The Zero could outturn, outclimb, and if pressed, simply disappear into the clouds. Tactics that worked over Europe or North Africa failed over the Pacific. There was no playbook, only desperate improvisation. Some pilots tried to stick together, hoping mutual support might buy a few extra seconds of life. Others gambled on head-on attacks, aiming for a lucky shot before the Zero rolled away. But the kill-to-loss ratios told the real story. In 6 months, US Navy and Marine squadrons lost as many as 12 planes for every Zero brought down. The myth grew with each defeat. The Zero was not just a machine, but a terror. In mess halls and tent cities, rumors spread of pilots who survived only by bailing out, or of squadrons wiped out in a single afternoon. The sense of helplessness was real. No one could say how to beat the Sky Phantom, and yet every pilot knew the next mission would bring another encounter. Something had to change. The war in the air was being lost, and the men who fought it could feel the noose tightening with every sortie. June 4th, 1942. Over the battered docks and oil tanks of Dutch Harbour, Tadayoshi Koga's Zero swept in low, guns blazing. Anti-aircraft crews, manspate, sadetivaget samoemsisasi now submitted. As sensed mayastidal. Officers from the 206th Coast Artillery fired back with every weapon they had. In the chaos, a .50 caliber round found its mark. The slug punched through the thin aluminum skin, severing the oil return line. Koga, just 19 and already a veteran, didn't panic. He throttled back, watching the pressure gauge drop, a black plume trailing behind him across the Aleutian sky. His two wingmen, Endo and Shikada, fell in beside him, scanning the clouds for threats, but their eyes kept flicking to the growing stain under Koga's Zero. The emergency protocol was clear: head for Akutan Island, 25 miles east, where rescue submarines waited offshore. With every mile, the engine's song grew rougher, coughing as oil sprayed from the wound. Koga nursed the throttle, calculating how far he could push the crippled machine. The weather closed in. Low cloud, drizzle, the kind of Aleutian gloom that swallows up landmarks and hope alike. Over Akutan, the trio circled a flat, grassy stretch near Broad Bight. From above, it looked solid enough. Shikada radioed Koga to set down, trusting the ground was firm. Koga lowered his landing gear, lined up his approach and touched down. In an instant, the wheels bit into hidden marsh. The Zero pitched forward, flipping onto its back with a sickening crunch. The airframe, stripped of armor to save weight, crumpled under the stress. Koga was killed instantly. A broken neck from the harness, not from enemy fire. His wingmen circled once, torn between duty and loyalty. Doctrine demanded they destroy any downed Zero, but neither could bring themselves to fire. They banked away, leaving the battered fighter and their friend behind. The Akutan tundra swallowed the wreck, its secret intact for now. For all its mythic power, the Zero had proved as fragile as its pilot, brought down not by a dogfight, but by a single well-placed shot and the unforgiving ground. The wreck lay silent, inverted in the marsh, its pale wings half buried in the sodden grass. For Makoto Endo and Suguo Shikada, circling above, the war's harsh rules pressed against the weight of friendship. Japanese doctrine was explicit: no Zero must fall into enemy hands. Yet, in that moment, neither man could bring himself to fire. The thought of strafing the battered fighter, Koga's fighter, felt like a second betrayal. They banked away, engines droning low, leaving the crash site untouched. In their hesitation, a secret was sealed beneath the Aleutian fog. Akutan Island offered concealment the pilots could not have planned. Summer in the Aleutians meant endless cloud banks, shrouding the ground in a grey veil. Rain fell nearly every day. The marsh where Koga's Zero had come to rest was a patchwork of bog and standing water, mapped only by the tracks of wild geese and the shifting winds. No patrols passed this way. No rescue came. The weather, so often a curse to pilots, became an accomplice, hiding the wreck from prying eyes. For 5 weeks, the Zero remained where it fell. The canopy, still latched, bore the marks of a hurried landing and a life cut short. Koga's body, slumped in the harness, was shielded from scavengers by the upturned cockpit. Rainwater pooled in the engine cowling. Salt spray and mist worked their slow damage, but the structure held. The paint marked with the red Hinamaru faded in the constant drizzle, but the airframe was largely intact. The marsh, soft enough to flip the plane, proved gentle enough to cushion its remains. Endo and Shikada's decision lingered in the squadron's memory. Post-war interviews reveal regret, a sense that duty had been set aside for mercy, with consequences no one could imagine. Japanese command would never know, but for the Americans, the outcome was profound. The Zero's secret rested in the tundra, untouched by scavengers, undisturbed by search parties, waiting for the moment when chance and weather would give up its prize. All it took was a lost patrol, a break in the clouds, and the right set of eyes to find what war and loyalty had left behind. July 10th, 1942. Lieutenant William Thies, piloting a PBY Catalina on routine patrol, found himself off course in the fog-bound Aleutians. As his crew scanned the endless grey, machinist mate Albert Knack spotted something unnatural, a shape half buried in the marsh on Akutan Island. Thies circled low, mapping the position, his mind racing with possibilities. What lay below was more than wreckage. It was a Japanese Zero, nearly intact, its pale wings stark against the sodden grass. Thies returned to Dutch Harbour and pressed his commanding officer, Paul Foley, to act. The urgency was clear. This was no ordinary crash. Orders came swiftly: assemble a recovery team, keep the operation classified, and move before the enemy could intervene. The first salvage attempt began the next morning. Thies and his crew, joined by Navy photographer's mate Arthur Baumann, slogged through knee-deep bog to reach the site. They recovered Koga's remains and documented the airframe, noting its remarkable preservation. But the marsh held the Zero fast. Without heavy equipment, the team could only report back. The prize would not come easily. A second team, led by Lieutenant Robert Kermser, returned with more men and tools, but faced the same stubborn mud. The salvage ship lost 2 anchors to the shifting ground, and the marsh threatened to swallow both plane and crew. Only on July 15th did a third effort succeed. With cranes, cables, and brute force, the team righted the Zero, dragged it from the peat, and crated it for transport. Security was tight. Armed guards posted day and night, Japanese insignia covered, movement logged at every checkpoint. The Zero travelled under wraps aboard USS St. Mihiel, bound for Seattle, and then San Diego. Every step was shrouded in secrecy. For the first time, American hands held the key to the enemy's deadliest weapon. The marsh that had killed Koga had preserved his fighter. Now the war's greatest secret was on its way to US soil. At Naval Air Station North Island, the battered Zero was stripped down, cleaned and painstakingly restored. Mechanics worked through August, repairing bullet holes and replacing damaged lines, careful to preserve every original part that might still hold a secret. By September 20th, 1942, the aircraft was ready for its first American test flight. The man chosen for the job was Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, a seasoned Navy test pilot known for his steady nerves and precise hands. Sanders climbed into the unfamiliar cockpit, scanning Japanese gauges and controls, then taxied out onto the runway. The Zero's engine caught with a smooth, eager rumble. And moments later, Sanders lifted off over San Diego Bay, the first Allied pilot to fly Japan's most feared weapon. From the very first circuit, Sanders recorded what the numbers could not reveal. The Zero responded lightly at low speeds, dancing through turns with the same effortless agility that had haunted Allied pilots. But as Sanders pushed the throttle and built up speed, the controls began to stiffen. Above 200 knots, the ailerons, so responsive in a dogfight, locked up, making it nearly impossible to roll or evade quickly. He noted the absence of armor behind the seat, the thin metal skin, and the fuel tanks with no self-sealing protection. Even a single incendiary round, Sanders realized, could turn this nimble predator into a fireball. After landing, Sanders filed his report. The Zero was deadly in a turning fight, but dangerously fragile and nearly uncontrollable at high speed. The myth of invincibility had a fatal flaw. In his own words, we now had the cure for the Zero. By late 1942, American squadrons began rewriting the rules of air combat. Intelligence from the Akutan Zero filtered into new training manuals and briefings, changing how pilots approached every fight. Instead of turning with the Zero, US flyers learned to strike from above, diving at high speed and climbing away before the enemy could react. A method soon known as boom and zoom. This tactic played directly to the Zero's weaknesses. Its controls stiffened dangerously above 200 knots, making it slow to roll or turn in a dive. American pilots, flying the rugged F-6F Hellcat and the powerful F-4U Corsair, now used their speed and armor to survive where none had before. The effect was immediate. In the Solomon Islands and above Rabaul, Hellcat squadrons reported victories that would have sounded impossible months earlier. The kill ratio, once a source of dread, flipped overnight. By 1943, the Hellcat boasted a 19-to-1 kill ratio in the Pacific. 19 enemy planes downed for every Hellcat lost in combat. Navy reports credited the new doctrine and the hard lessons learned from the captured Zero. Pilots who once feared the Sky Phantom now hunted it, trusting in their machines and their tactics. The Corsair and even the P-47 Thunderbolt joined in, each exploiting the Zero's lack of armor and fragile fuel tanks. Bulletins circulated: aim for the engine, dive for speed, never dogfight on the horizontal. The myth of invincibility evaporated. American squadrons, once outmatched and outnumbered, seized the initiative and never let go. In September 1942, US engineers flew the recovered Akutan Zero at North Island, recording its lack of armor and non-self-sealing fuel tanks in official test reports. These findings directly changed Allied tactics, leading to new boom and zoom strategies and the rapid ascent of aircraft like the Hellcat, which achieved a 19-to-1 kill ratio against Japanese planes. Yet, some details of the Akutan salvage operation and test program remain classified or lost, leaving gaps in the full story of how intelligence shaped the Pacific War. What is clear from declassified Navy documents and combat records is that a single crash in Alaska dismantled the Zero's invincible reputation. Today, historians point to the Akutan Zero as proof that technical secrets can turn the tide of war. The legacy remains: no machine, however feared, is beyond being understood and overcome.